Alright, so now that we have an overview of our workspace, the basic panels and commands that we're going to be working with, now I want to take a look at starting our solid model. So this is a bit of a mental puzzle to put together to try to envision in your mind. And if we take a look at the sample isometric view here, we can see that if we were to remove or fill in all those holes for all those features, right? If we didn't have any of those cutouts, the basic shape, the basic form of our bracket is U-shaped, of uniform thickness, okay? Now considering the standard views that we're showing here, such as the top, front, and right side, what you need to be able to do is to picture your subject or your solid that you're trying to model within a cube and try to determine which view of the cube reveals the basic profile of the model that you're trying to create. If I take a look at the top view here, I can see that this is the basic profile here, which I can develop as a closed polyline or groups of lines, and using region I could then extrude to produce the solid. So with this understanding, let's go into our model, and I've just adjusted the colors here so it's easier for you to see in the video. And let's talk a little bit about organization, and then we'll talk about some system variables that we're going to be using to work with our solids. So first of all, if we take a look at layers, you can see based on our template here, we're going to be working in the 3D layer. But I also have some construction lines here. Okay, I like to use construction lines to lay out my geometry. Alright, it's easier for me to see and verify dimensions, and I can, since it's on a separate layer, I can freeze it anytime and come back and validate my design dimensions. So we're going to be creating the solids on the 3D layer, but we're going to be using our construction line layer to lay out the design. Now by default, right, we're working in the world UCS, and by default it is the top view. Because I have my grid on and I can see my UCS icon, I can see the origin down here in the bottom left hand of the drawing area. Looking at the navigator here, you'll be able to use these buttons on the navigator to change your views, right? And what you'll also be able to do, again, if you take a look at your view panel here, you'll also be able to look at views in your pull down to reestablish your top, front, or right side views. So it's going to be important for you to know where you're at, to orient yourself in the model space. Okay? Another thing I like to do in order to visualize the development of 3D parts is to use the view pull down menu, or you could even use the view tab and look at your viewports. And I like to split the screen into two. If you look at the bottom there, the command line, I'll do vertical. That way we have one view on the left and one view on the right. Typically I like to use an ISO view, right? So I can see the 3 dimensions that I'm working with simultaneously as I look at one of the standard views. So I have my drawing area split in two, okay? And you can see here in the navigator, you can also see what the current UCS is. Now here I want to make sure that it's the world UCS. I'm going to be working on the left side here in orthographic mode, and you can see on the right side I'll be viewing what I'm creating there. So as I proceed, right now the default UCS is the world UCS, right? Where Z is 0, and you can see over here I have my X and my Y. Now I'm going to switch back to home, and I'll take a look at my layers. Right now I'm on layer 0, but I'm going to start in construction line layer. Okay. Now referring to your sketch of the drawing, okay, for the dimensions, that's what I'm using. I'll be able to establish the layout. Okay. So I'm going to just use some regular 2D commands. Construction line, which is XL, the option for vertical, which is V, and I'm going to establish the first one at 0, 0, at the origin. Okay, so you can see there's one line right there. Now again, based on the dimensions of the part, I'm going to lay out the basic form, which I'll then come back and fill in as a closed polyline. So here I'm going to offset a total length here of 350 from left to right. Now I'm going to establish another horizontal construction line, also at the origin. Okay, so this will represent the front face in the top view, and then I'll offset to create the thickness and the overall width. Okay, so I've got an overall width of 250, so I can use that for my offset. And you can see this is where general shape and form will take place. If I offset now for the thickness, which is going to be 0.25, okay, I'm going to offset one of these construction lines here, the horizontal one right here, and the one on the right, and I'm making these offsets towards the inside. Okay. Now if I switch layers, I'm going to switch to the 3D layer here. And now, again, I'm going to use another 2D tool, right? Either Polyline, or you could use lines, or you could even trim these construction lines, okay? But the reason why I'm using a Polyline is because I can make a closed loop, okay? As a closed loop, I don't have to use a region. But if I have just collections of lines, right, then I have to make a region. So here, if I just use Polyline, again, using the drafting settings there, I can detect the intersections. Alright, you can see that. Now if you don't detect the intersection right away, you might have to zoom in and out so you can detect the intersection, because we are using dashed lines, right? You can see that right there. So as I go around, making sure I'm using my polar tracking as well to make sure I have vertical and horizontal lines. And then as I come around here, I can just simply use C to close it, right? Now what do I have? If I use my layer tools here to freeze the construction line layer, and since we already know where we're starting, let's go ahead and turn off the grid, just to make it easier to see. There's a closed profile. Okay, I know it's a closed profile too, because if I select it and I take a look at my properties, we can see that it's a polyline and that it's closed, right? Now, if we just had collections of lines, what we could do is we could close it as a polyline, or we could create it as a region. We'll talk about that a little bit later as we do the other features. Alright, so now just to create the base profile, look at this. I'm going to switch over to this viewport on the right side, and now I'm going to take a look at modeling panel. Here I'm going to use the extrude command, and you'll notice since I had the polyline selected, automatically I can extrude it in either direction. Now this is just dynamic, okay? But I can input. You notice at the command line it says specify the height of the extrusion. Well, I know exactly what that is, so I can input it directly. 2.0, enter. And there you go. There's the basic form. If I take a look at the view panel, or the view tab here, and I look at my visual styles, you can see, if I turn it to shade it now, you can see on the right side how I have a solid model there. Now, that's one way to do it, right? We could also incorporate additional features by editing the closed polyline. So let's try this a different way, because you'll notice that in our model here, we've got filleted corners. We've got a radius of 0.12 on the inside of the front face and on the outside as well, right? Why not combine that with our 2D profile? So let's step back again so I can show you this. I'm just going to undo. Okay, undo the extrusion. And let's come over here to the left side again. Again, this is still my closed polyline, right? If I use fillet, F for fillet, check your radius. I'm going to set that to 0.12. Alright, make sure the trim mode is on. So if you look at trim, you can see the trim mode is on. And now I can go ahead and use multiple, since all of those fillets are going to be the same size. And let's do the inside corner here on the left, the outside corner, and then we'll zoom out and we'll do the right side inside here, and then also the outside. Great. So if you think ahead and take a look at the solid model, try to understand what's the basic shape, what's the basic form, what are the main profiles that I can use to drive the main shape and form, and incorporate your sketch tools to be able to create that profile either as a closed polyline or a collection of lines that are converted to region. Again, we'll talk about that later. But now you can see on the right side, okay, there's the completed profile. Again, I'll do this a different way. If I go to home, nothing is selected right now, so I can escape. Nothing is selected, and I'll use extrude. And you can see the command line, it's prompting me to select an object. I'm going to select the closed polyline, doesn't matter what viewport you're in, and then hit enter. It's the only thing that I want to extrude, right? And now you can see I can move it up and down dynamically or punch in the value 2.0 and enter. Alright, that's our basic extrusion. And just to finish up this discussion here as we move on for the other features, let's take a look at face tress or facet resolution and isolines. You'll notice here on the fillet I have a series of lines, right? And you'll notice that if I go back to the View tab, that I'm in 2D wireframe. Okay. When I switch to a shaded view, I don't see those isolines. So the isolines are only shown in your 2D wireframe. You can see here's my hidden view, and then here's the 3D wireframe. So these are the only two views, the 2D and the 3D wireframe, where you'll see these isolines. Now isolines, okay, they help define curved forms. Okay, notice if I type in isolines here and enter, that's a system variable. By default, it's set at 8. Count how many lines you have there. You'll notice that if I reduce it to 2 and enter, now I may not see a change right away, but if I type RE or use regenerate command, that's also in your view pull down menu, here's regenerate, you'll see it'll refresh the viewport. There's only 2 or up to 2 isolines there to describe that shape, right? Let's type it in again, isolines, and here I'll go twice as big as the normal, and let's put in actually more, let's put in 24 and hit enter, and again regenerate and enter. Now look how many lines you have. So the number of isolines really gives you more definition on curved surfaces. For now, I'm just going to leave it at the default, set isolines back to 8, and regenerate and enter again. Okay, so you'll see the need to increase or decrease the isolines with the changes or in the complexity of your models. But another one that you want to look at is called facet resolution. This is the one we want to have really fine resolution, okay? Because this is going to show us the shape and form when we use a shaded style, right? Now, you might not be able to see, but you can see a little bit of the flat edges here, right? Produced by the limited number of isolines that we have. But in reality, it's being driven by facet resolution. So if I type that in, face tress, hit enter, you're going to see there's the default value, 0.5. Okay, let's say we bump it up to 10, and then we hit regenerate again, RE, and then enter. Now you'll see a smoothing of the surface here with a higher facet resolution value. Okay, now again, if it's really complex, you might want to reduce it. But if you need to see the fine details, you might need to increase it. So you can punch in face tress and take a look at the help menu options and get a better understanding of facet resolution as well as isolines. So generally for our purposes, just set it to 10 and that should give us enough detail. Alright, so in the next video we're going to take a look at how we're going to develop each of these faces.